AJ, welcome. Thanks for coming out today. Have a
Yeah,
conversation with us about your business journey, the things you have been up to recently in the past, things you're aspiring to in the future.
no, I appreciate you having me out, man. This is fun.
Yeah, this
Always fun talking and chatting and sharing.
there's a lot I want to ask you. There's a lot
Absolutely.
of I know that you have more to share than we can cover in our short segment here. So we'll choose wisely, and we'll see where
We can
the
always do a round two. We can always
yeah
do a round two.
we'll see where the rabbit trail goes,
Sounds
as they
good.
say, Alice in Wonderland. For those listening, AJ is the CEO and founder of Simple Plan IT, cybersecurity company based here in Columbus, Ohio. He's also an award-winning author and a veteran, and just a fantastic community leader and just person overall. So I've been AJ. I remember the
Truly humble
first
me.
time I met you, and this speaks volumes to the type of person he is. I actually interrupted you. You were in the middle of a conversation with someone else, and I don't quite remember why, but that person left you to come join a conversation I was in, and it was abrupt.
Yeah.
And I will never forget the way you handled that. And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna get to know that guy because that's a good man right there. It wasn't the most pleasant transition, and my fault on that. But you have a grace and a charisma about you that it's attractive. So
Appreciate it.
how did we say we just talked about this? How did we say we were going to start
Um, just talking about the origin story
the origin story?
and kind of how I got into entrepreneurship,
That's right.
but it was very unusual. Like I'm not the typical I don't have the typical founder story. Like I didn't come out set out to solve this big problem. I'm gonna start a business and we're gonna grow it. That wasn't my origin story. I tell people I did not seek out and set out to be an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship found me. And I give credit to the military for me becoming an entrepreneur at all because so back in 2005, I was working as a outbound salesperson, project manager for an IT shop, doing their account management and things of that nature. And I would come across opportunities where the solution that I represented at the time, it wasn't the best fit for the client. And the military always taught me just to have integrity. And so my thing was, if I knew that I wasn't the best fit, but I knew somebody else was, then I would, because while Columbus is a big city, it still has a small town feel. A lot of the players
Mhm.
know who each other are, and so there were different opportunities. And prime example is if I came across an opportunity where there was a dental practice. Well, there's a lot of nuances within a dental practice from an IT standpoint, the programs that they use and everything else like that. That the company I represented at that point in time, they weren't a good fit. But this company over here was, and so I would send them over there and say, "Hey, talk to so and so over there.
Yeah.
He'll take good care of you.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions or anything, let me know. But at the same time, all I ask, I'm not looking for any kind of monetization. Just next time you hear somebody that says anything about technology issues, computer issues, give me the first referral. Just mention my name first and introduce me. And that's all I ask for. And so people started to do that, and they would go and talk to whoever I told them to go talk to. And then a couple of times they started to come back and say, "Hey, we met with your guy and we didn't understand anything that he said. Do you mind sitting in on a meeting with us and helping us to understand it? Since you know what it is that we need and what we're trying to do, can you help make sure that we don't get oversold on stuff and that they actually give us what it is that we
Sure.
need?"
Yeah.
I'm like, sure. Once again, 30, 45 minutes of my time, no problem. Once again, not asking for anything. And so did that a few times. And at the end of one of those meetings, a gentleman by the name of John gave me an envelope with a check in it. He said, "Hey, your time is worth something. Take it." And so he wouldn't let me leave without it. I stuffed it in my back pocket, run out to the car because it was raining. Get in the car. I pulled out and I opened up. It was a check for $500. And I'm like, holy shit, I just made $500 for being a translator for 30 minutes. Like, I didn't do anything. In my mind, I didn't do anything.
Right. Right.
And so I'm like, if I just made $500 for this, I was like, next time somebody asks me to sit in on one of these meetings, I'll see if they're willing to pay for my time. And so time goes by, next opportunity does come along, and I asked the person, I was like, "Hey," I was like, "Are you mind paying for my time to do this?" And they're like, "Sure, what's your rate?" I was like, sheepishly, I'm like, "How about $100?" And they're like, "Sure, no problem." Not even thinking that somebody had already given me 500. Why didn't I start there? But that's literally how I started my business was,
Mm.
filling that gap and being a virtual chief information officer, helping small businesses understand the technology solutions that they were putting in place and making sure that the solutions that they put in place and the vendors that they hired aligned with what the strategic goals for the business were. And so I started that company back in 2012 and it has grown in such into, well, started in 2012 and then we got into about 2015 2016. I realized I couldn't scale that the way that I thought I could. um, I realized that it was a unique skill set to have somebody that understood technology and understood business and could talk both without being rude and condescending. Because let's be honest, most IT
That's the
people are
key.
most IT people have a reputation for being rude and condescending, and being jerks sometimes. And so it was hard for me to find people that had that good blend of things. And so I looked at what most of my clients were struggling with at that point in time, and cybersecurity was becoming a really big issue. And so around that point in time, I had some guys that I had served with that were coming out, and we decided to join forces. We built a security operations center, and the rest has been history. And so we've been, as you mentioned before, running cybersecurity and doing behavior-based analytics on networks for rapid detection, rapid response for internal and external threats. So um, every device that's on a network produces a log and says what it's doing. We ingest all that information, create a baseline for what your network normally looks like, and then we use those as behavior patterns to look for anything that goes outside of the norm as an indication that something wrong is going on. And then we can dive in, take a look at it, and go from there.
So pattern detection, anomaly detection, is this in MLAI type play, or is it more less sophisticated, just obvious, hey, this is something that shouldn't be happening
It's
within the wall?
more obvious, and we're bringing in, so with our security operations center, we bring all that information into a single pane of glass. So that we've got multiple tools out there that sit on the networks that are grabbing this information and sending up indicators and notifications of, hey, this is what's going on. And half the battle when it comes to cybersecurity is understanding the information that you're actually being presented. I think so many groups or firms, whenever they're doing it in-house,
Mm-hmm.
have alert fatigue and all these false positives, and being able
Yeah.
to weed those things out. And that's really where the key is understanding what's a threat, what's not a threat, what you should be focusing on, what you shouldn't be focusing on. And that's where
Yeah.
having a solid security team on the back end really comes into play.
Knowing the signal from the noise and
100%.
being enamored with the ability to have all this data is actually overwhelming and
100%.
disadvantage
100%.
by having it. You're worse off just by having it than when I didn't have it, because you don't know what to do with it.
Because you got all this stuff and you're like,
It's
all right, what's important, what's not important?
Yeah.
What do I do with all the stuff that I've got?
Yeah. So sounds like part of the service, the advisory work on the front is educating and helping guide through that massive data and say, here's what's important.
100%. Well, and doing that for them.
Doing
And
it for
so
them. Okay.
what we actually do is with our SOC, we'll actually do all of that stuff for you. So we become the ingestion point, and then we can either do as much with it or as little with it as you want. So what I mean by that is we see something that comes in, hey, it triggers something on our side. Our guys look at it and be like, okay, this isn't right. Somebody needs to take a closer look at it. And so if the client has an in-house team that can take a look at it, then we send that over to them and say, hey, look at this. Here's all the information that you need to support it. And then let us know if you need any further support on the back end. For some organizations, they don't have that team on the inside that can do that. And so we actually will do that for them. So we'll come in and we'll do the remediation part for them and do the investigation and then document everything for them along the way.
Two questions come to mind. What size of the market segment are you serving that they're at that inflection point where we have we've ignored this topic and gotten by, maybe luckily up until this point, but we now need to make an investment, or B, we've made some investments, but the scale of our growth and the risk that's attached to some sort of disruption, be it, a ransomware attack or you name it, these threats, but that risk of being disrupted from ops is so great that they don't want to invent it in-house. Right. They don't want to build the team. Are these across industry segments or revenue size? Like who is the prime like a good market candidate for working with you guys?
So we've done a lot of work, and really our focus has been on the small business segment. And small business, I know, is a relative term. So we kind of looked at that classification of 500 employees and under,
Okay.
because we look at device counts and how big your network is. Because what people don't realize is that every device that's on your network is a vulnerability point. If it's on the network and it has access to the internet, it can be hit, and it's a vulnerability point. And so having that visibility and that total view of everything that's on your network and everything that's doing it, from your cell phones to the smart devices, IoT automation for
Yeah.
manufacturing and things of that nature, and the robotics that they're putting in now. Like, if it's on the network and it touches the internet, it is now a vulnerability point. And business leaders need to understand that from a prospecting mentality standpoint of, okay, I need to make sure that I'm mitigating these risks. Like, what am I doing on my side to mitigate these risks and be aware of them so that they can put them in their planning process, their risk management? Because for me, cybersecurity, everybody says cybersecurity and they instantly think IT. And while IT is a portion of it, really cybersecurity needs to be reframed as digital risk management. How are
Sure.
you
Yeah.
managing the risk to your digital assets? Because that's what criminals are after. They're not after your computers. They're after your intellectual property, your financial data, your client data. They're after your digital assets. Or they're looking for ways that they can impact or force pain upon you to extract money from you. Ransomware attacks, DDoS attacks, and things of that nature. And so understanding that that's really where the issue is, and it's not your computers, you have to take a holistic viewpoint from your business. How are you training your employees? What are your policies and procedures? How do you enforce those? Take a holistic view, and that's how we start to make an impact when it comes to cybersecurity. And so the 500 employees and under
Hmm.
is really where we've been focusing at, just because every person on average, when you think about how many devices that you have that you do work on, typically people have three. They may have a desktop computer, a laptop, and a cell phone. That's on average. That's very typical. So when you talk about three devices per person, that's 1,500 devices that are all vulnerability points, and we haven't even started talking about the person themselves. We're just talking about the devices they have.
Yeah.
The person themselves, their credentials, all the different access logins that they have. You have to make sure that you're watching all of those for all the cloud apps and everything else like that that we're using. And so, once you start to look at it from that way, you start to see how it really compounds and expands on all your attack surface and your vulnerabilities and everything else like that. And so that's really where we start to come in.
Do you,
Go
oh,
ahead.
on the preventative side,
Hmm.
do you also get involved on remediation after an event?
Hmm. Yeah. So
Is
let me reframe. Um, if you're a client, we will assist with any kind of remediation because we have access to all the logs. We see what's going on and we have that back-end information. If you've suffered an event and you need somebody to come in and do forensic audits, that's not really our forte. But we do have partnerships with
okay.
people that will come in and do those things, because going in and doing forensics is a slightly different skill set. And requires a lot more time and really digging into it. And so that's why our goal has always been, let's be on the preventative side. Let's prevent these things from happening. Let's make sure that we've got the right systems in place. Let's make sure that we're training and educate our employees on the latest threat tactics and vectors and everything else like that, so that we do our best to prevent becoming a victim versus how do we fix this now that this has happened.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a fast-growing space, not going to get easier
No.
either. We've committed to going digital and having 10 devices,
The
thousands
world
of
has.
devices. It's
I mean, let's
it's
be honest. We're moving fast to the point where you've got people that are already testing, implants and being able to do things from touch and wave and
yeah,
everything else like that. Which, you know, think of where we're going with all this. I mean, you're talking about AR and augmented reality and virtual reality and the possibilities there. You talk about autonomous driving vehicles. You talk about, single occupancy drones that are being tested right now, and all of the cool technology that's out there. I love the opportunities of it. And when I'm in those rooms and having those conversations and we're geeking out about this stuff, I'm like, cool. All right, now that we've looked at all the fun stuff, it's on the network.
It's
What are we doing to
yeah,
protect it? Because now
yeah,
every single one of those are now vulnerability
yeah,
points. And so how do we protect the backside of
yeah,
that as well? How do
yeah,
we have visibility? Are we able to see when things go wrong with these devices? Because criminals have already shown, They had the Jeep hack back in, I think it was 99, where Jeep was hacked and somebody was able to control it. You had casinos that were hacked through a smart fish tank. So a fish tank that was on the network to regulate the pH balance had an open port on it, and they were able to, criminals were able to get in, then get into the network on for the casino. I mean, so if it's on the network, it's a vulnerability point. And so you have to be aware of that and just don't. I guess that's my biggest thing. You touched on it earlier. A lot of what we do is education. I
Hmm.
say 90% of what we do is just trying to educate people on, hey, this is how you need to think about it. Let's change your
Yeah.
perception and perspective on cybersecurity. How are you managing your digital risk? Because everything exists in a digital world now, and you need to look at it from that perspective and not just how do I lock down my computers and
Yeah.
my antivirus and
Yeah.
firewalls.
And the bad actors, they look for the path of least resistance, which,
100%.
like it or not, often is new emerging products, which are going to market quick
Yep.
and fast, chasing adoption, and maybe have assumed that they'll circle back to hardening up how it plays in the network later.
Well, but
Sometimes.
I mean, let's be real. It's the Microsoft model. Microsoft invented that model where, yeah, the product's not 100%. Let's push it out there, and then we'll listen to the customer on all the different issues, and then we'll go and fix those and patch those up as quickly as we can.
Yeah.
And so that's everybody's following that exact same
Yeah.
model. It's like, let's get this thing to market as quick as we can, and then
Mm.
from there we'll fix whatever issues that pop up. But we'll let the market identify what our issues are rather than testing it in house, because that's good require too many dev people,
Yeah.
require too much time. We need to get to market because first to market typically wins. And so I get it.
Yeah.
I'm not beating it up. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that model lends itself to these vulnerabilities
For
that
sure.
are constantly being found every single day.
For sure. I want to go back to something you said earlier as we were talking about um, addressing the thinking behind something, why it happened, and what approaches can be taken. I know you've written a book
Yes.
that is aimed at sharing some of your thinking, your team's thinking with the world.
Right.
One of the hardest challenges of a CEO is duplicating himself.
100%.
Being with client A when you're with client B, being with other people you don't work with when you're not physically present. And authorship provides you a way to share ideas with people you've never met, people that will outlive you, all of us. And tell us a little bit about why you wrote the book, the impact that you hope that it would have on your community and people you work with, and just tell us how that came to be.
So it's interesting. So I wrote the book in 60 days. And well, let me take two steps back. So the book is The Art of War in Business Technology. And it's designed to help business leaders understand how to better manage technology, and not only manage technology, but also manage their cybersecurity, their digital risk. And so I wrote the book in 60 days. And as kind of the reason behind it. So we came into 2020, and uh, as I've mentioned before, so 2020 comes in. I turned 40 in 2020, so 20 plus 20 equals 40. I was like, this is going to be a great year for us. And then so January comes. My birthday is on the 14th of January. And then next thing I know, the whole world shuts down in March. It was just like COVID hit and just disrupted everything. And so it's just like, all right, how are we gonna navigate through this? Because it was so
For
unreal
sure.
and something that nobody had ever seen. And I don't think that anybody could have predicted the far-reaching impact it would have had. And so we're working through that. And then in May, I got diagnosed with thyroid cancer, which was just such a surreal moment. I remember sitting in the chair and the doc says, all right, AJ, I know you don't want to hear this, but you've got thyroid cancer. But the good thing is it's thyroid cancer. It's the most treatable form of cancer. So you're good. I'm like, time out, doc. I was like, one, good and cancer don't go in the same sentence. I was like, so if that's your sales pitch, I was like, never use that again.
Not buying it.
That's a horrible sales pitch. Just from a salesperson, don't ever use that again. But I also knew that, the way that I looked at it was, yes, it has a high success rate and people survive this, but it's not 100%. So what happens if I'm one of the lower percentage of, what if this is the beginning of the end for me? So I started to look at everything in my life, like what have I left an impact that have I made an impact that will be missed if I'm gone, and have I done enough to make my kids proud? And for me, I was like, there's got to be more that I can do if this is the beginning of the end. And so the writing a book was the easiest thing, or at least the best way that I could think of to get my knowledge and my perspective out that could then be shared and could outlast me. And so, oddly enough, I sit down and I'm like, I'm gonna write a book. And then I was just like, all right, what am I gonna do? So I create a framework on all the different topics that I wanted to cover in this book. And I get down, I'm starting to write, and I got so much writer's block. It was just so bad, because I would lose my train of thought on where I was going. And so it was like, oh, I've got this idea and it's going to tie into this and this, that, and the other. I'll get down, I start writing it, and then I couldn't write as fast as I could think. And so therefore, I forget where I was going. Everything just seemed
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
broken and disjointed. So what I did, here's a hack for everybody out there that thinks that they want to write a book. I'm gonna make it very simple for you. I created that framework, and then what I did was I recorded myself talking about those topics because I could talk and speak faster. The train of thought from my brain to my mouth was a lot faster than my brain to my hand. So I could talk about it the entire time. And then once I had it all recorded, I ran it through all this great technology, had it transcribed, and that gave me the framework for my book. And I just went in and cleaned it up from there. So that's how I was able to write it in 60 days. And one of the biggest
Mm.
compliments that I get about the book, which has far surpassed anything that I could have imagined as far as the impact and reach. It's gone on to win 3 different awards, which I had it wasn't in my plans. Nobody could have ever told me that that would have happened. But one of the biggest compliments that I get is that it's very conversational. They're like, it's an easy read. It's not talking down. It was very easy for me to
Hmm.
follow and comprehend. It was like, they're like, we felt like you were just having a conversation. I was like, well, it's because I was. I was like, I was just talking.
Yeah.
And so it just felt very natural. And so that was how I was able to write it in such a short amount of time.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so simple, highly innovative, and y- we write different than we speak.
100%.
But you wrote a book the way you speak, and it's definitely connected with a large audience of
It,
fans and people who've benefited.
once again, I could not have imagined how well it was been received. And I've mentioned before, one of the biggest for me writing this book, well, just the whole experience of 2020 and just putting things in perspective, changing and adjusting my life vision, which was, you know, everything now has to map back to what's your impact and what's your legacy.
Hmm.
Um, you know, we can, I can grow my business. I can make more money. I can start a business because I've done it. I've got that experience. I feel confident that I can start another business. I can make more money. I can always make more money because I can find opportunities. But what's my impact and what's my legacy? And how's that mapping back to that? And so for me, everything that I do now maps back to, are you increasing and advancing my impact and legacy, or are you detracting from it, or are you just doing nothing at all? And if you're one of the other two, then why am I doing it? And that's how I base all of my decisions on now. Impact and legacy. Yes, are we growing the business? Great. Why are we doing this? What is our impact from a business standpoint? From Simple Plan IT, what is our desired impact and legacy? What are we trying to do? And even going back to the name of Simple Plan IT, you know, I I wanted to, one of the things that people told me whenever I started this work was, you make complex things sound very simple. I was like, well, that's the goal. I was like, because it shouldn't be as complicated as what it is. And so I was thinking one night, I was like, how do I convey that? And it was just like, well, I create simple plans for people's IT. And that's how the name really came out to be, was Simple Plans for IT, Simple Plan IT. And that's the way we came about it. And so, when I think of the impact and legacy that I want to have for that company, it's, how do we help businesses be better at what they're doing? If everybody wants to go to market faster, well, cool. Let's have if we're a safety net that allows you to move faster, you can go to market faster with less risk because there's a
Hmm.
team watching all of your gaps that you may or may not know exist or that are now presented. And if you don't know that they're, when we talk about cybersecurity and people look at, the old way of addressing cybersecurity was very much the way that you look at protecting a building. You put sensors up and you have all these different notifications and you're just waiting for somebody to tell you that something's gone wrong. The challenge is that in the digital world, today there's a wall here, but tomorrow there's a window. And if you don't know if that window now exists, you have a vulnerability point. And if you don't know that an employee has brought in a rogue device, that is now a vulnerability point. And so there's all these different changing things that if you don't have visibility into it, you don't know. And so that's the safety net that we want to provide for
Hmm.
businesses. It's, hey, you want to move fast? You want to go to market fast? Fantastic. Don't do it recklessly. Have somebody on the back end that's at least watching your backside to make sure that you're protected as you're moving fast and that you're not going to put yourself in a compromising position. So in the military, we call that the overwatch. The overwatch is the guy that's sitting up top.
Oh, I see.
He's the
Yeah.
sniper, the overwatch looking over everything and saying, okay, move here, move there. Yep, you're good here. Oh, wait a minute. There's this thing over here. Watch out for this. That's the position that we try to play with our security operations center.
AJ, I want to close our time by talking about another topic that I know is dear to your heart. It's you talk about making complex things simple for the business. This is a complex topic. Everyone is searching for simpler solutions to it, and it touches on your past in the military. I know you're passionate about working with veterans. I'd love to hear more about it, and it intersects with mental health. And I can speak firsthand as a person whose family's been impacted by mental health. Um, what's in your heart regarding some of the nonprofit work that you're looking to do in the future?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and how that connects back to what you told us earlier with wanting to make an impact, wanting to make a legacy, that you have a story and a set of skills, but who is it for?
Right.
And why am I here?
So I got involved and really passionate about helping supporting veterans whenever I found out that the statistic that 22 veterans commit suicide every day. And in talking with people and doing more digging into it, a lot of people think that that number is a little bit low. But when I looked at it, it was like 22 veterans, 22 of my brothers and sisters are committing suicide every day. And it was like heartbreaking. I was like, why? And so I started to look back at my own journey. Whenever I transitioned out of the military, it was a rough transition. And more veterans I've talked to, they said the exact same thing. And when you transition out, you lose a lot of stuff that you don't realize that you're losing. The first thing that I realized that I lost was I lost my identity and sense of purpose. In the uniform, I was part of something bigger than myself. This ideation of protecting and promoting democracy, and protecting it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And so I'm part of this big ideology. Out of the uniform, I was just AJ, and I didn't know who that was. So I didn't know what my purpose was. What was my reasoning for being in this world outside? Now that I went from this big thing to now I'm just AJ and I don't know where I fit. The second thing that I lost was I lost my community. When you're in service, and I don't care what branch you're in, you're surrounded 24/7, 365 by people that think and function the same way that you do. We may not always get along, and it's a unique dynamic that I try to explain to people. Is like, we could hate each other, but I knew that when it was time to go to work, that I could trust you to do your job and protect my life, and you could trust me to do the exact same
Right.
thing, because the mission came first. Everybody coming home came second, and then we can go back to our petty squabbles after that. But those two things superseded everything else. And you get out of out of the military, out of that environment into the civilian world where you don't have any of that. And so, I went back home and it was just like, okay, I don't fit in here because the people that I used to hang out with, I'm a different person now. I look at things differently. And so it was a struggle. And the next thing you know, you find yourself on this island of trying to figure this stuff out by yourself because you're a different person. You're trying to find out what your identity is. And, that's when depression starts to creep in, and it's one of those things where whenever I got out and transitioned out of the military, I wasn't depressed. I was excited about the next chapter. Like, I'm going to go do this and I'm going to go do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 8, 9 months down the line where none of the things that I thought were going to happen actually happened. That's whenever I started having those doubts of, well, what is life all about? So going back to how do we solve this problem? How can we get them gainfully employed? Or if you've got an idea, how do we help you turn that into a business? So financial issues, how do we address the financial issues? Because financial stress and strain, we know even as civilians, will kill relationships and kill people. I mean, it's the number one reasons why people get divorced, financial stress and strain. So how do we address that so they can provide for themselves and their family? The second thing that we look to address is how do we provide a community to where they feel like they've never left their uniform, where they've got their brothers and sisters that they can come to and say,
That's right.
hey, we relate to each other and this is what I'm struggling with. So that you're not on this island trying to figure it out on your own. Because a lot of people don't realize Ohio has the 5th largest veteran population in the country. The fifth
Wow.
largest veteran population. That means that there's hundreds of thousands of veterans, service members that have already transitioned and found success outside of the uniform. Why aren't we doing more together to reach back and help those that are transitioning out to make sure that they don't hit the same stumbling blocks that we hit? That's been my question. That's now my when we talk
Yeah.
about impact and
Yeah.
legacy. Now that's something that I can move because I know how to do that. I've already walked the path. In that thought process, in that vein, a group of us are starting and standing up an Ohio Veteran Chamber of Commerce, where we can be that centralized hub. Where if you're a transitioning service member, we want you to connect to us and say, "Hey, look, this is where you're at. Fantastic.
That's
We're
right.
going to help you find gainful employment. If you've got an idea, we're going to help you start a business. And at the same time, here's the community that you can plug into, so that you're not doing this on your own."
AJ, thank you so much
No, this
for
has been a
joining us
blast.
today.
No, thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure listening, learning. We'll keep talking and go from there.
Sounds good. Thanks,
All
Kyle.
right. Yeah, thank you.